I found a little girl's raincoat in my hallway closet, and when I checked the pocket, I realized my husband hadn't just lied to me. He'd built another life nearby secretly. It was bright yellow. That's the first thing I remember. Not my husband's face, not the words he said later, not even the moment everything finally broke open. Just that little yellow raincoat hanging behind my winter scarf like it had every right to be there. I stood in the hallway closet with one hand on a stack of old board games, and the other holding that tiny coat by the plastic hanger, staring at it like my brain had stopped working. For a second, I actually thought maybe I was more tired than I realized. Maybe I had forgotten something obvious. Maybe my sister had brought one of her grandkids over and left it behind. Except my sister lived 3 states away, and no child had been inside my house in almost a year. I remember touching the sleeve. It was soft, light, still clean, not old, not forgotten for months. It smelled faintly like strawberry shampoo and that sweet, powdery smell little kids seem to carry with them. There was a tiny smudge of dirt near one cuff, like someone had worn it to school or the park and then taken it off carefully. I don't know what made me check the pocket. Maybe because I needed a normal explanation so badly that I was willing to look for one. Inside was a folded permission slip from Brookside Elementary. I unfolded it right there under the hallway light. Field trip to the State Science Museum. Student name, Ava Harper. Emergency contact, Daniel Harper. Relationship to student, father. My husband's name is Daniel Harper. So is mine. For a few seconds, I just stood there breathing through my mouth, reading the paper over and over like the words might change if I looked long enough. I could hear the dryer running in the laundry room. I could hear our refrigerator humming in the kitchen. Outside, a car drove past the house. Everything sounded completely normal, and that was the most disturbing part. Because my whole life had just tilted, and the world hadn't noticed. I was 47 years old, married for 19 years, and I had just found proof that there was a child connected to my husband that I knew nothing about. Not a niece, not a friend's daughter, not a godchild, not some harmless misunderstanding. Ava Harper, father Daniel Harper. I wish I could tell you I handled it well. I wish I could say I took a breath, sat down, and thought clearly. I didn't. I put the coat back exactly where I found it. I folded the permission slip with shaking hands and slid it into my jeans pocket. Then I walked into the kitchen, sat down at the table, and stared at the fruit bowl for I don't know how long. There were bananas in it that needed to be thrown out. One of them had gone soft and brown on one side. I remember that because my eyes kept landing on it, my mind refused to fully step into what I had found, so it grabbed onto stupid details instead. Banana, salt shaker, the tiny chip on the rim of the cereal bowl drying by the sink. Anything but the truth. Daniel and I had what most people would call a quiet life. We lived in a blue 2-story house on a calm street outside Columbus, Ohio. Nothing fancy, a decent neighborhood, mature trees, sidewalks, people who waved when they got the mail. We had a back deck, a golden retriever named Murphy, and a marriage that looked solid from the outside. For a long time, I believed it was solid from the inside too. We met when I was 26 and he was 29. He had kind eyes and a steady voice, and this way of making everything feel less dramatic than it was. I love that about him. I was the emotional one, the talker, the one who stayed up replaying awkward conversations from 2 years earlier. Daniel was the kind of man who tightened loose cabinet hinges on Saturday mornings and remembered to rotate the tires before winter. He made life feel safe. At least, that's what I told myself for years. We wanted kids. That part matters, maybe more than anything else. We tried for a long time, too long. The kind of long that changes the shape of a marriage even when nobody says it out loud. Doctor visits, blood work, 2 miscarriages, 1 failed IVF cycle that took our savings and some part of my hope with it. By the time I was 40, I was tired in a way sleep couldn't fix. Daniel stopped bringing it up. I stopped pretending every month didn't hurt. Eventually, we became one of those couples who said things like, "We have a good life anyway, and it just wasn't meant to be." And I think in some ways, we really believe that. We built routines around the empty spaces. Friday takeout, Sunday coffee on the deck, road trips in the fall, murky compromises, quiet grief hacked away so neatly it almost looked healed. That's why the coat felt like a bomb in the closet, because it wasn't just evidence of a lie. It touched the one wound in our marriage we had both learned to walk around with practiced care. Daniel had been acting strange for a while, not cartoonishly strange, nothing obvious enough to make me accuse him of anything, just little things that didn't fit. He had started working later 3 or 4 nights a week. He said the company was restructuring and everything was a mess. He became weirdly protective of his phone, not in some dramatic way, just subtle. If it buzzed, he flipped it over. He took calls in the garage. He started using cash more often. There were little gaps in his explanations that I noticed and then dismissed because life is busy and marriage teaches you to ignore small discomforts if you don't want to live in constant suspicion. A month before I found the coat, I had opened the trash can to throw away a paper towel and saw an empty applesauce pouch on top. One of those squeeze pouches for little kids. I had actually laughed to myself and thought maybe Daniel had grabbed it at the grocery store because he was hungry and in a rush. He ate weird things sometimes. Once, I saw him eat cold baked beans straight from the can. But now, sitting at the kitchen table with that permission slip burning a hole in my pocket, I remembered the applesauce pouch, then the fruit snacks, then the little plastic spoon in the sink that wasn't from our silverware set, then the cartoon thumbnail that had popped up on the TV under continue watching one Saturday morning when Daniel had been home alone and I'd gone to get my nails done. At the time, I'd frowned at it and asked, "What is this?" He shrugged and said Murphy must have stepped on the remote while he was out mowing. I actually accepted that. I wanted to believe my life. That afternoon, I did something I had never done in 19 years of marriage. I searched my own house like I was trespassing in it. I started small, the mudroom bench, the guest room closet, the garage cabinets. At first, I kept expecting to feel foolish, like I was 1 minute away from finding some reasonable explanation that would make me ashamed of myself. Instead, I found a pink toothbrush behind the box of travel toiletries in the bathroom cabinet, then a pack of children's bandages in the kitchen junk drawer, the kind with cartoon dinosaurs on them. Then, in the guest room dresser, tucked underneath an old set of flannel sheets, I found 2 pairs of tiny leg leggings, a pair of socks with yellow grips on the bottom, and a stuffed rabbit with one ear bent down. I sat on the guest room floor holding that rabbit, and something inside me went cold. Not hot, not angry, cold. Because by then, I knew this was not one accidental item. This was a pattern, a system, a hidden life that had been moving inside my house just outside my line of sight. I opened the top dresser drawer and found a coloring book with 3 pages filled in. On the inside cover, in careful childish letters, was written AVIH. Underneath it, in bigger handwriting I recognized immediately, was Daniel S. You forgot this at Daddy's house, Peanut. My stomach dropped so hard I thought I might throw up. Daddy's house, not Daddy's office, not Uncle Daniel's place, not a family friend. Daddy's house. I went into the bathroom and got sick. When I looked up, my face in the mirror didn't even look like mine. I was pale and gray around the mouth. My eyes looked older. There's a specific kind of pain that doesn't arrive like a scream. It arrives like silence, like all the sound being vacuumed out of a room. That's what I felt. I wanted to call someone, my sister, my best friend Nora, anybody, but I couldn't. Not yet, because saying it out loud would make it real, and I still had this desperate animal part of me hoping there was a twist, a context, some explanation that would hurt less than the one my mind had already built. So instead, I cleaned the kitchen. I know that sounds insane, but people do strange things when their life splits in half. I wiped the counters. I emptied the dishwasher. I folded the throw blanket on the couch. I fed Murphy early. My body needed a task, something simple and physical, while my brain spun. Daniel texted me around 5:30. Running late, don't wait for dinner. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I wrote back, no problem. I hated how normal that looked. 2 little words from a wife who still had no idea who she was married to. He got home a little after 8. I heard the garage door, the familiar heavy step, the jingle of his keys in the bowl by the entryway. I was in the living room with the lamp on and the TV muted. Murphy padded over, tail wagging. Daniel bent to pet him, loosened his tie, and smiled at me like it was any other Thursday. That smile almost broke me more than the lie. Hey, he said, you eat. I nodded. Long day. Kind of. He walked into the kitchen and opened the fridge. There's leftover chicken, right? I watched him move around our kitchen. This man I had loved for almost 2 decades, and I wondered how many times he had walked in carrying pieces of another life with him. How many times he had kissed me hello after leaving a child somewhere. How many stories he had told me while keeping a whole person hidden. I should have confronted him right then. Maybe a stronger woman would have. But I didn't want a denial. I didn't want a half-truth. I didn't want him shaping the story before I understood how big it was. So I said nothing. That night, I lay beside him in bed listening to him breathe. I stared at the ceiling fan turning slowly in the dark and thought about the words on the coloring book. Daddy's house. Around 2 in the morning, he rolled toward me in his sleep and put one arm across my waist. I froze. That touch, which had comforted me through panic attacks, funerals, flu seasons, and bad years, suddenly felt wrong. Not because it hurt, because it didn't belong to the man I thought he was anymore. The next morning, after he left for work, I called in sick. Then I did the one thing I had never imagined doing. I logged into our phone account. I wasn't especially tech savvy, but I knew enough to find the usage records. There was one number repeated over and over, sometimes 4 or 5 times a day, mostly during his lunch hour and just before 6 in the evening. I copied it down, then searched it online. Nothing. I typed it into Cash App. A name came up. Aaron Cole. My chest tightened. I didn't know any Aaron Cole. Then I checked our joint bank account. Daniel handled most of the bills, not because he controlled the money, but because he was better with details and I was happy to let him. I could see the regular transactions, mortgage, utilities, insurance. Nothing jumped out at first. Then I noticed transfers, small enough to hide inside normal life. $400 here, $300 there, always on different dates, always to the same account ending in numbers I didn't recognize. I went back 6 months, then a year, then farther. It was never the same amount, but it was consistent. There was also a recurring payment for a storage unit on the other side of town. I wrote everything down in a notebook with the date at the top, like I was building a case against my own marriage. By noon, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the pen. At 1:30, I drove to Brookside Elementary. I don't know what I thought I was going to do. Walk inside and ask for a child. Announce myself as the secret wife. Maybe I just needed to see if it was real beyond the paper in my pocket. Maybe I needed to stand in the parking lot and look at the building where this hidden truth had been moving around without me. I parked across the street and waited. School let out at 3. The crossing guard came out first, then teachers, then kids poured through the doors in jackets and backpacks and bright little voices. It was chaos, but the kind of ordinary chaos that made me feel like I was underwater. Then I saw him. Daniel. He walked out from the side entrance like he had done it 100 times. Comfortable, familiar. He wasn't in work clothes. He'd changed into jeans and a navy quarter-zip sweater I'd bought him last Christmas. He stood near the curb, scanning the crowd with a look I had seen before at airports and restaurants when he was waiting for me. Then a little girl ran toward him. She had dark hair in 2 loose braids and that same yellow raincoat. She hit him at the waist with the full force of a child who knows she'll be caught. He bent down laughing, pulled her into his arms, and kissed the top of her head. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my fingers cramped. There are moments when pain becomes physical so fast it almost feels like impact. That was one of them. I felt it in my ribs, in my throat, in my teeth. Because he didn't look guilty. He looked like a father. Like this mattered to him. Like this was normal. Like he had been living in a truth I was never invited into. The little girl said something I couldn't hear. He smiled and adjusted her backpack, then took her hand and walked her toward his truck. Toward my truck, parked 3 rows away. I ducked down instinctively, heart slamming, and watched them get in. My husband leaned over to buckle her seatbelt. That tenderness ruined me. Not because she had done anything wrong. She hadn't. She was a child. But because I had begged that man to build a life with me. And there he was, doing something beautiful and ordinary for someone he had hidden from me for God knows how long. I cried so hard I couldn't follow them right away. I had to wait until my vision cleared. When I finally pulled out, his truck truck was already halfway down the road. I kept enough distance not to be obvious. He didn't drive to our house. He drove to a small rental complex 15 minutes away, one of those aging brick apartment places with narrow balconies and uneven parking lines. He parked near building C. Ava climbed out, and he carried her backpack while she skipped ahead. A woman opened the apartment door before they even reached it. She was maybe in her late 30s, thin, tired-looking, blonde hair pulled into a rough ponytail. She kissed Ava's forehead, then looked at Daniel in a way that made my blood run hot. Not flirtatious, familiar, worn in, like history. He went inside with them and stayed there. I sat in my car across the lot for 42 minutes. I know because I watched the dashboard clock like it was attached to a detonator. When he finally came out, he stood for a second on the walkway talking to the woman. She folded her arms. He rubbed the back of his neck. It looked tense. Then Ava appeared in the doorway holding that stuffed rabbit I'd found in my guest room, and she waved. Daniel waved back, got in the truck, and drove off. I sat there after he left, staring at Building C, apartment 12, feeling like I had fallen through the floor of my own life. That night, I didn't say a word when he came home. I watched him eat spaghetti across from me. I listened to him complain about a budget meeting. I watched him ask if Murphy had gotten his pill, and something in me hardened in a way I didn't recognize. This wasn't one lie. This was thousands of lies stitched together so tightly they had become his normal. 3 more days passed before I confronted him. Not because I was weak, because I needed to know everything I could before he started talking. I went to the storage unit Saturday morning while he was out grabbing mulch for the flower beds. The keypad code was our anniversary. That should tell you everything. Inside were plastic bins, a twin mattress leaning against the wall, a small white bookshelf, a child's bicycle with training wheels removed, and 2 framed photographs turned backward. I lifted the first one. Daniel, younger by maybe 8 or 9 years, holding a baby in a hospital room. The second was worse. Daniel sitting on a park bench with the same woman from the apartment, Ava between them at maybe age 4, all 3 smiling at the camera like a family. I sat down right there on the concrete floor because my legs gave out. There were documents too, a folder labeled medical, another labeled school, a stack of birthday cards tied with a blue ribbon. I opened one. To Ava, age 6. I'm sorry I can't stay tonight. I'll make it up to you Saturday. Love, Dad. Another. To Ava, age 8. I know this year has been confusing, but none of this is your fault. I love you more than I've ever said out loud. My hands started to go numb. There was a child. She was at least 8, maybe 9. This wasn't recent. This wasn't some sudden emergency. This had been unfolding for nearly a decade while I slept next to him, planned holidays with him, buried my mother with him, sat through fertility appointments with him. I found one more thing in that storage unit that changed the story from terrible to almost unbearable. An old envelope with my husband's handwriting and a date from 11 years earlier. Inside was a folded letter from the woman, Erin. Daniel, I can't do this by myself anymore. You said you needed time, but I'm already pregnant, and your wife deserves the truth even if you're too scared to give it to her. I'm not asking you to love me. I'm asking you to act like this child exists. 11 years earlier. I did the math in my head. 11 years ago was when I was going through my second miscarriage. That spring is burned into my memory. The blood, the hospital smell, the look on Daniel's face when the doctor stopped using hopeful words. I remembered coming home empty and hollow, and barely able to stand in the shower because grief had weight then, actual weight. And sometime around that same season, while I was losing our baby, my husband had got another woman pregnant. I don't think I have words for the sound that came out of me in that storage unit. It wasn't a cry, it wasn't a scream, it was something lower, something older. By the time I drove home, I wasn't shaking anymore. I was clear. When Daniel got back with bags of mulch in the truck bed, I was sitting at the kitchen table with the permission slip, the letter, and the hospital photo laid out in front of me. He walked in, saw my face, then saw the papers, and stopped. There are moments when a person's whole body answers before their mouth does. His did. His shoulders dropped. His skin changed color. He didn't ask what this was. He knew. For a second, neither of us said anything. Then I asked the question that had been tearing through me for 3 days. How long? He closed the door quietly behind him. Claire, how long? I said again. His eyes went to the letter, then the photo, then the permission slip. 9 years, he said, barely above a whisper. I laughed. It came out ugly and broken. 9 years. He pulled out the chair acro SS from me but didn't sit. I was going to tell you. No, you were. I tried more than once. You had 9 years. He pressed his hand to his mouth. I had never seen him look small before. He always had an answer, a plan, some practical step. That day, he looked like a man standing in the ruins of something he knew he had set on fire. It started with Erin from work, he said. It was during a bad time. We were barely talking. You were shutting down and I... Stop. He stopped. I leaned forward. Do not stand in my kitchen and tell me you cheated on me because I was grieving our dead baby the wrong way. His face crumpled then, truly crumpled. That's not what I meant. But it is what you said. He sat down slowly. It was a few months. It ended. Then she told me she was pregnant. I didn't believe her at first. Then I did. By then I had already chosen us. I didn't know how to destroy you with that. Destroy me. Like honesty would have been the destruction, not what he actually did. So instead, I said quietly, you lied to me for 9 years. He looked down. Yes. There's something almost insulting about how clean the truth can sound once it finally arrives. Yes. That's simple. I asked him if Ava was really his. He said yes. DNA confirmed it years ago. I asked how often he saw her. At first not much. Erin moved away for a while then came back. They had an arrangement. Money, visits, holidays moved around like a secret custody calendar inside my marriage. In the last year, Erin had started struggling. Pills at first, then worse. Daniel had stepped in more, picking Ava up from school, bringing her to our house when Erin disappeared or slept through afternoons. Our house, I repeated. He nodded once, like he knew how monstrous that sounded. I asked if Ava knew about me. No, he said. She just knew I couldn't always stay. I stared at him. And what am I asked. The reason you couldn't stay. The obstacle. The wife in the way of your real life. No, he said quickly. Never that. But what else was I supposed to call it? A child's toothbrush in my bathroom. time, a rabbit in my guest room, a coat in my closet. He had built a secret life not in some distant city, not online, not hidden safely behind business trips. He had brought it into my home, into the rooms I dusted, the sheets I washed, the walls I painted. That betrayal had a texture to it. It felt intimate in the cruelest possible way. Then he said the sentence I still think about sometimes. I loved you both. Maybe he meant it to sound sincere. Maybe it was sincere, but hearing it felt like being erased. Because love without truth is just a performance that benefits the liar. I asked him if he loved Aaron. He said no, not then, not now. That whatever had happened between them was over years ago. That Ava was the only reason he was still connected to her. That Aaron had spiraled, and he had been trying to keep the little girl stable. That he was going to tell me once he figured out how to make it make sense. I remember feeling this strange, exhausted rage at that, as if there were some version of this that could ever make sense. Did you ever look at me, I asked, when I was crying after the IVF failed, and think maybe I deserved to know you already had a daughter? He didn't answer. He didn't have to. His silence told me yes. That was the moment I stood up and realized my marriage was over. Not because he had fathered a child, not even only because he cheated, though that would have been enough. It was the daily cruelty of letting me grieve in the dark while he carried the thing I wanted most into another life. It was letting me believe we had suffered the same loss when he had secretly become a father anyway. It was the years of watching me make peace with emptiness while he rationed out pieces of himself elsewhere. I told him to leave. He cried, actually cried. I had seen Daniel cry maybe twice in 19 years. Once when his father died, once when Murphy got hit by a car as a puppy and we thought he wouldn't make it. Now he cried at my kitchen table and said he was sorry and that he never meant for it to become this and that he had loved me the whole time. I believed he was sorry. That didn't save him. He packed a bag. Murphy followed him through the house, confused. I stood in the hallway and watched the man I built a life with carry a duffel bag to his truck while the late afternoon sun hit the driveway exactly the way it always had. Before he got in, he turned back and said, I know I don't deserve this, but when you can, please don't hate Ava. That was the one thing he got right. Because I didn't hate her. I couldn't. If anything, thinking about her made everything sadder. A child had grown up in the shadows of my marriage. A child had been taught that love meant fragments, different homes, partial truths. A father who showed up with tenderness and left with secrecy. None of that belonged to her. After he left, I called Nora. The second she heard my voice, she said, what happened? And I broke. Not neatly, not with composure. I sat on my own kitchen floor and told my best friend that my husband had a 9-year-old daughter I never knew about. And every time I said it out loud, it sounded impossible all over again. Nora came over with 2 grocery bags full of things I did not ask for but ended up needing anyway. Soup, crackers, tissues, a bottle of wine neither of us opened. She stayed until midnight, mostly sitting beside me in silence. Real friends know when words are useless. The days after that moved strangely. Daniel stayed in a hotel at first, then in the apartment complex near Aaron and Ava. He texted, called, sent long apologies I couldn't read all the way through. I spoke to a lawyer, then another one. I changed passwords. I opened a bank account in my name only. I told my sister. I told exactly 3 people at work and said I needed time before the gossip machine got hold of it. Murphy waited by the door every evening for 2 weeks. That part hurt more than I expected. The house felt haunted, not because of ghosts, but because ordinary objects had become evidence. The guest room door, the junk drawer, the hallway closet, even the TV remote. I kept noticing little things and wondering if they had belonged to Ava's hidden visits. A broken crayon under the couch, a child-sized fingerprint on the glass of the back door, a cup in the sink with a cartoon octopus on it that I had once assumed came from some work event. I wasn't living in my home anymore. I was living in a crime scene made of domestic details. About a month later, Daniel asked if we could meet in person. I almost said no. Then I said yes, because I had questions I still needed answered, and I didn't want those questions following me for the rest of my life. We met at a coffee shop halfway between the house and his office. Public, quiet, safe. He looked older already, grayer, like guilt had an actual weight after all. He told me Aaron had entered rehab after an overdose scare. He was trying to get temporary guardianship of Ava until she was stable. He said he knew how it looked, but he was trying to do the right thing now. I almost laughed at the now. Then he told me something I wasn't prepared for. Ava knows about you, he said. I felt my whole body tense. She found a picture of us in the truck. She asked who you were. I told her the truth, not all of it, but enough. Why would you do that now? Because I'm done lying. There was a bitterness in me at hearing that sentence after 19 years of marriage. I asked what enough meant. He said he told her I had been his wife for a long time and that I didn't know about her and that I was hurt because he had made very bad choices. I stared at my coffee. Then he said, she wrote you something, but I didn't know if giving it to you would be unfair. A letter from the child who had been the shape of my betrayal. I don't know why I said yes. Maybe because I needed to see what innocence looked like when it had been dragged into adult wreckage. He reached into his jacket pocket and handed me a folded sheet of notebook paper. The handwriting was large and uneven. Miss Claire, I'm sorry my coat was at your house. I didn't know it was bad. My dad said you are sad because he lied and that is his fault. I don't want you to be sad because of me. I like your blue flowers in the kitchen. They are pretty. From Ava. I read it twice. Then I folded it back up carefully and slid it into my purse. That little note destroyed whatever clean version of anger I had been trying to hold onto. Because betrayal always wants a villain you can point at, and life keeps refusing to be that simple. Daniel had done something unforgivable. Aaron had participated in a lie that swallowed years of my life. But Ava was just a little girl who noticed the flowers in my kitchen. After that meeting, I sat in my car for a long time and cried harder than I had on the day I found the coat. Not because I wanted my marriage back. I didn't. But because grief had become more complicated than rage. And complicated grief is the hardest kind to carry. I mourned my marriage. I mourned the version of Daniel I had loved. I mourned the years I would now revisit with new eyes, seeing cracks where I once saw trust. And in some strange way, I mourned the family I never had and the hidden one that had existed just out of reach. The divorce moved forward. Daniel didn't fight me on anything. Maybe guilt made him generous. Maybe he knew there was nothing he could say that would make him deserve grace. I kept the house for a while, then sold it the following spring. I couldn't stay. Every room held too many layered versions of truth. I downsized to a townhouse with big windows and no hallway closet deep enough to swallow secrets. People like to imagine betrayal ends with one dramatic confrontation, and then a clean exit into a better life. It doesn't. It lingers. It gets into your nervous system. It makes you suspicious of silence. It makes you read tone into ordinary texts. It makes you pause before relaxing into happiness, because some part of you now believes peace might be the same thing as not noticing in time. For months, I woke up at 3 in the morning with my heart racing. I would lie there replaying memories, looking for clues I had missed. The late work meetings, the extra cash, the Saturdays he volunteered to grocery shop alone, the children's music ID once heard faintly when I pulled into the driveway and assumed was coming from a neighbor's car. I became obsessed with the idea that I should have known. My therapist was the one who finally said, "Claire, not knowing is not the same thing as failing." That sentence changed something in me, because I had been treating my trust like stupidity, like if I had just been smarter, sharper, less loving, less willing to believe, I could have saved myself. But trust is not stupidity. Trust is the thing betrayal steals, and then tries to frame as your weakness. Over time, the sharpest parts softened. Not quickly, not beautifully, just honestly. I stopped checking Daniel's social media through fake accounts I pretended not to have. I stopped asking mutual friends for updates. I stopped building imaginary conversations where he finally understood what he had taken from me. Real healing began when I accepted something ugly and simple. Sometimes the person who hurt you understands it perfectly and still did it anyway. About a year later, I ran into Daniel once at a pharmacy. I was in the cold medicine aisle, and he was holding a box of children's fever reducer. For 1 second, we just looked at each other. He looked tired, not tragic, not redeemed, just tired. "Hi, Claire," he said softly. "Hi." He glanced at the box in his hand. "Ava's sick, ear infection." I nodded. That could have been the whole conversation. Maybe it should have been. But then he said, "She still talks about your flowers." I felt a strange ache in my chest. I had moved into a place with a small kitchen window full of potted herbs and cheap grocery store bouquets. Whenever I remembered to buy them, "Tell her I said thank you for the note," I said. He nodded. His eyes filled a little, but I didn't stay to watch what he did with that emotion. It no longer belonged to me. I walked away with cough drops and paper towels, and the quiet understanding that some wounds never become beautiful. They just become survivable. If you ask me now what hurt the most, I don't think I'd say the affair. I think I'd say the intimacy of the deception. The way he let me keep house inside a lie. The way he let me wash sheets and plan dinners and light candles in rooms where another truth had already been living. The way he looked me in the face and accepted my trust every single day like he had earned it. That was the deepest cut. Not one mistake. A system. A life built in the space between what I saw and what he chose to hide. And yet, as strange as it sounds, that yellow raincoat also saved me, because it ended the slow death of a life that wasn't real. It forced the truth into daylight. It gave shape to what my gut had been feeling before my mind could prove it. It reminded me that denial can feel peaceful right up until the moment it ruins you. I still think about that day sometimes. The hallway light, the coat hanger, my hand in the pocket, the permission slip unfolding like a sentence already passed. There was a version of me before that moment who believed love meant safety if you gave enough of yourself to it. There is a version of me now who knows better. Love is not proven by history, not by shared mortgage payments, not by how long someone stayed, not even by how sincerely they cry when they're caught. Love, if it is real, can survive truth. What Daniel gave me could not. So if there's any lesson in what happened, it's this. Pay attention to the quiet wrong thing, the small object that makes no sense, the explanation that lands a little off, the discomfort you keep smoothing over because you're afraid of what it might mean. Sometimes your life doesn't fall apart all at once. Sometimes it hangs in your hallway closet, bright yellow and tiny, waiting for you to finally reach into the pocket.